Hi, this is Brian Gibbons and welcome. From REI Skills, we're talking about an introduction to wraparound mortgages or AITDs. AITD stands for All-Inclusive Trust Deed. Now it depends on what part of the country you're in. All 50 states do wraparound mortgages a little bit differently, but let's just talk about how can we buy on a wraparound mortgage or an AITD. It's a great way to buy without credit rating or a lot of cash. So using a second mortgage, what's popular is a seller-held second mortgage. Sometimes a buyer may not be able to qualify for enough financing from a bank to purchase a seller's property. To get the property sold, the seller can take back a portion of the sales price in the form of a second mortgage. This can be very helpful when purchasing a property yourself. It is commonly done by real estate investors who are retailing or rehabbing a property to a home buyer who doesn't have enough money to put down or is hard to get financed. Second mortgages can also come into play when the seller is willing to deed you the property subject to. We discussed that a little while ago, but they do not want to, and they still want to get paid for some of their equity. So that's what we use second mortgages for. So a wraparound mortgage. Another type of seller-held mortgage is a wraparound mortgage or an all-inclusive trust deed. These are used when a seller owes money on an existing first mortgage or trust deed. Rather than the buyer assuming the seller's existing loan, the seller makes out a new loan to the buyer. The buyer then makes the payment to the seller on a wraparound mortgage, and the seller makes the payment on their loan to the bank. The main problem with wraparound mortgages is they almost always violate the due on sale clause in the seller's underlying financing. As a buyer, you also have to worry about the seller collecting your payment and then not making their payment on their first mortgage. Just to let you know how we handle some of these issues, many times we'll put the property into a land trust and we'll use a third-party payee from the buyer to the third-party payee paying the mortgage first, and then anything more, the rest of it goes to the seller. So what are the advantages of a seller-held mortgage or a wraparound mortgage or an all-inclusive trust deed? Well, there's little or no money required. First, many truly motivated sellers will not look very much money down, if any. If the seller does want a lot of money down, then you're not dealing with the right type of seller and you need to move on. No credit required. You also don't need any credit to qualify for a seller-held mortgage, unless the seller specifically asks to see your credit report. Even then, the seller is not going to scrutinize you like a bank would. Seller financing does not show on your credit report. One advantage that can help you down the road is that seller-held mortgages do not show on your credit report. This can be helpful when you're trying to get bank financing to buy other properties, because your credit report does not show as much debt. What are the disadvantages of a seller-held mortgage or wraparound mortgage and AITD? Finding motivated sellers who own free and clear properties. Probably the biggest disadvantage to buying properties using only a seller-held mortgage is that you must find properties in which seller owns it free and clear of any loans or liens, and who is willing to collect their money in monthly installments. Disadvantages. Again, wraparound mortgages violate the due on sale clause. As we said a minute ago, if the seller does not own their property free and clear, a wraparound will violate the due on sale clause on the underlying first lien. This is due to the fact that the title of the property has transferred without the underlying loan getting paid off or assumed. We do use land trusts many times in a wraparound mortgage. Closing costs. Another disadvantage is when the seller held mortgage is that you're going to have to pay some closing costs because the title is transferred and a new mortgage or trust deed to the seller has been recorded. There's also other attorney's fees and closing costs if you want to make sure everything is done right. If the seller isn't getting any money down, they may not want to come to closing with cash for their side of the closing costs. Therefore, you may wind up paying all the costs just to get the seller to do the deal. The seller will have to foreclose. Finally, because this is seller financing in which the seller's interest is secured by either a mortgage or a trust deed. The seller will have to foreclose in the event that the buyer defaults on their payments. Because of this, you should never sell your property using a seller-held mortgage or trust deed or a wraparound mortgage or an AITD. There are other seller financing options you can use when selling your own properties that can afford you more control. What are the types of properties to invest in wraparound mortgages? Well, any property that you feel is a good investment is a good candidate if the seller is flexible enough. However, as a general rule, wraparound mortgages, AITDs, are only used by investors for buying rental property or an occasional rehab deal. These properties are almost always in nice homes in nice areas needing only minor cosmetic work, if the home needs any work at all. As a home buyer, if you can find a seller who's motivated or flexible enough, you can purchase virtually any house you wish. The bottom line, buying on a wraparound mortgage AITD in many states is a great idea for real estate investors. Buying on a wraparound mortgage AITDs and renting it out, or rent to own on a lease option. You can protect the seller by holding a deed in escrow if you do not pay the mortgage. These are common in many states. They do not work well in some states. I want to thank you for listening to this short presentation about wraparound mortgages and AITDs. It's a great way to buy without credit rating or a lot of cash.